Today, we sat down with Mr. Mark Gabriel, President and CEO of United Power in Colorado. He's also the author of Visions for a Sustainable Energy Future. We talk about his journey through the electric utility industry and the experiences that led him where he is today. And then we get into his thoughts on the challenges facing our grid, things like explosive load growth, demand management, hyperlocalization of energy, and the impacts of these data centers everybody's talking about. After that, we take a look back at the predictions Mark made when he wrote his book back in 2008. So if you're interested in where our industry is headed and what the future of the electric grid looks like, this is an episode you don't want to miss. Let's talk about it. You're listening to PowerGridTalks, from the bucket trucks to the boardrooms. I'm your host, Tom Williamson, a journeyman lineman with over 15 years in the trade. Here we bring you real stories and real conversations from the field to the executive suites of the electric utility world. It's about the people who keep the power flowing and the grid strong. Let's get to work. Today on this episode of Power Grid Talks, we're here in Brighton, Colorado, and we're sitting down with the president and CEO of United Power Incorporated, Mr. Mark Gabriel. How we doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making time for us today. Like I said, I know your schedule's crazy, so it means a lot to sit down with you. I know you weren't born the CEO of United, so talk to me about how that kind of came about and how you got to this point.
Sure. I always say I'm an accidental tourist in this industry, but it's been 35 years. I used to work for a place called the Vermont Marble Company, marble and granite, think big buildings, Lincoln Memorial, United Nations building. But we also had a power division, because back at the turn of the last century, and I mean in the 1890s, not the 1990s, many industrial concerns picked up electricity because it helped their industrial processes.
Okay.
So a buddy of mine was running the power division we had, 4 small hydro facilities, a couple of small gas units. But he called me one day because I knew the governor of Vermont and I knew the local media, and said that we were going to do a cogen plant. Now, of course, I had no idea. I said, what's cogen? And he said, well, we're going to take jet engines because we burn fuel oil to dry calcium carbonate, which is crushed marble. And I want to do a big event because we're going to now generate electricity with it. So the event turned out to be very popular. Governor Howard Dean at the time was a big deal. And I just went on to my normal day job. A few weeks later, he called and said, hey, we have to do this thing called demand side management. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, that's where we tell our customers to use less. And my reaction was, that's the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my life. But the state of Vermont required us to do that. Next thing I know, I was helping them out as a favor, creating a demand side management program. Pretty soon thereafter, I was recruited to our local utility, an investor-owned utility, Central Vermont Public Service, spent a number of years there. Got lured to California, ended up working for the Electric Power Research Institute, where I ended up as acting president. Then did several years of consulting for some of the biggest and smallest utilities around the globe. And back in 2013 was recruited to run the Western Area Power Administration, or known as WAPA.
Okay.
I took the power from 57 hydro plants across the West and ran a transmission system of 17,292 miles. That I was there for about 8 years. And then 5 years ago, next month, I was recruited to come here and run United Power.
Awesome. Okay. So
a non-traditional route.
That's definitely a non-traditional route with some very niche companies filled in there, right? Those experiences have got to be amazing. I wish we had enough time to sit down and get some more stories from that, because I'm sure you've got some awesome ones. I really think that it's important to note that the experience that's involved there on many different levels has helped kind of form your mindset and how you look at things today, right? And that doesn't just happen overnight. It takes years and years of commitment. Yeah. That's awesome. So now you're here at United Power, and you're changing some things here and doing your best to help keep them efficient. I saw an article that you had posted, and it talked about hyperlocalization of energy, right? So it really caught my attention because I feel like there's so many energy demands out there right now. And even earlier this year, we saw some releases from the regulatory committee saying, hey, we may have to cut back on people's power. We may have to have some local blackout situations depending on what the demand does here, because our supply and our demand are not talking to each other very well right now, right? So did that mindset kind of help drive you towards that, or were you already on that path before those issues started coming up?
Well, I'm a realist, okay? And as I said, I ran the Western Area Power Administration, miles and miles and miles of big wire. But I started in the business in the distribution side of the house. And that's really, quite frankly, where the industry started to begin with. I mean, we didn't create massive power plants and big grids from the get-go. We started with various towns and cities and then slightly broader states starting to electrify. Then we hooked it to transmission. But I look at the reality of what we have today, certainly here in the Western United States. And I realize it's very different in the East Coast. But here in the Western grid, we've got several issues. We've got large-scale power plants which are closing. We've got an increasing demand, a galloping demand, some would call it. Here at United Power, we're up somewhere between 5 to 6% demand per year. We're adding 3,000 to 5,000 meters per year in this cooperative. And so we're looking at that. We're also looking at what's going on in society. We've got 117,000 meters, roughly 350,000 of our members, and we are a co-op. I always say to folks, if you've flown to the Denver airport and you see all the growth around it, that's United Power service territory, just to orient folks. Out of 100,000 residential customers, 13,000 of our members have put solar panels on. More than 10,000 of us are driving electric vehicles. More than 500 of our members have batteries. Right? So that's sort of one set in society. The other sad reality is we cannot build enough transmission in time to meet this growing demand.
And that's exactly right. And I saw a stat the other day, and it was something around, I think in 2026, there's over $32 billion worth of transmission projects just for the IOUs in this country on the schedule. There's not enough manpower or materials or anything else to beat that rush of demand. Right?
Well, we just can't do it. Okay. I tally up transmission only because I always say I love big iron. I cannot lie.
Like that.
That's just kind of my my orientation. The transmission cavalry can't come over the hill in time to save us. By my calculation, there's roughly $50 billion worth of transmission projects that have been announced. In the past 5 years, we've built 4 billion. So now we're looking at more than a 10 to 12x. Even assuming we could get through permitting, even assuming we had the money, we absolutely don't have the manpower, we don't have the equipment, and we certainly don't have the wherewithal to do a 10x growth in transmission. So that kind of leads back to what I have to deal with at United Power. We've got to continue to support our members. We've got to continue to look at our growth. When I joined 5 years ago, we were a summer peak of 535 megawatts. Okay. Now my winter peak last year was 535 megawatts, and we're a summer peaking utility. We're nearly 700 megawatts of summer peak right now and growing 30 to 50 megawatts year over year.
So let me ask you your opinion on this while you're on that topic. That demand, is it population growing? Is it we're getting more electrified as a society? Or is it a little bit of all of it? What's driving a lot of it?
I think it's all of the above.
Okay. Okay.
A number of years ago when I worked at the Electric Power Research Institute, my boss used to say, electricity is the solution, it's not the problem. We've known that electrification of everything from oil and gas fields to vehicles to industrial processes is cleaner, faster, and more efficient. That's just that's just the reality of it. And so you've got a lot of drivers. There is a population growth. Certainly here for United Power, as I said, we're growing 3,000 to 5,000 meters per year. That's the equivalent to a typical co-op, right? In across the country, we're adding every single year. But on top of that, whether it's building, process equipment, how we think about it, one of our largest, it's our largest non-oil and gas member, gold and aluminum. They make, I always say, the white cloth cans and all of that metal, right? They're switching away from natural gas to electricity. Why? It gives you better endpoint control. It's much more efficient. It's quieter. It has got a lot of benefits. So that's pretty typical of what we're seeing.
Okay.
In addition, of course, in our case, we've got 4,500 oil and gas wells in our service territory. many are looking at electrification of their facilities. Well, why are they doing that? Number one, it's quieter, cleaner, a little bit less expensive, but more importantly, it allows them here in the state of Colorado, where we've got pretty rigid rules about air emissions by 2030 and carbon reductions. That's the one way they meet those rules.
Okay. So they can fit into the mold better that way. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I'll go back to the hyperlocalization. What has that meant for us? When I looked out 5 years ago and I got here, I said, how am I going to supply an increasing demand? What do I do? How do I think about it? Well, first and foremost, we said, hey, we've got to think about storage. So 2 years ago, we added 115 megawatts of battery storage distributed at substations. We already had 4.5 megawatts that we piloted here back in 2018. So now 9 of our substations have batteries ranging from 8 megawatts to 33 megawatts.
Okay.
They're on the distribution system because it helps me with resilience, reliability, and local control. I can run those batteries up to, depends which ones, but most of them are 4 hours or 6 hours. I can run them in bits and pieces, meaning I don't have to discharge it once and charge it once. It added to the robustness of my system, and it's local. Just this past August, we opened up a 162 megawatt natural gas plant called Mount Peak Power. We permitted it and constructed it in 20 months. So from concept to construction was under 2 years.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's amazing. And aeroderivatives from GELM 2500s, we got it constructed. It paid for itself within the first month.
Okay.
Right? So, and guess what? It's in my service territory. So that means jobs in my service territory, which is a cooperative, is important. It means tax revenues in my service territory. I can stay off transmission, which lowers the cost. So all of these things are valuable. And I always point out to folks, it's not like I had a choice. It's not like I said, well, I'm going to buy some from a gas plant 300 miles away because they're going to build transmission in time to support it. We just don't have that option.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that card's been taken out of the deck already.
It's been taken out. So would I like to see more transmission? Absolutely. Do I want to see more big generation locally? Absolutely. But I can't rely on that to supply the needs of our growing community.
And if you wait on that to happen, you're already behind the ball for you guys.
The average transmission line takes 15 years from concept.
Yeah.
I mean, so you think about that a moment, 15-year cycle. And I lived it directly when I was at WAPA. The concept of the Transwest Express project, going from Chokecherry Wind in Wyoming all the way to the LA Basin, right? That whole line was a WAPA project. It was conceived in roughly 2005. I signed the record of decision to build in 2015. Wow. And this summer, we will see first segments. Just put
that timeline's amazing.
People
don't realize how much goes in behind the scenes of those projects.
Right. And that assumes you can get the crews and you can get the equipment. Yeah. The competition for equipment is dramatic across the globe. And we have to think about, we just have to think differently. And I'd also point out, everything in our lives has become hyper-localized. I mean, think about it, right? When I was a kid, you got 3 TV channels, right? And you all watched the same thing.
Yep.
Today, the cable companies can't stay in business because we're hyper-localizing our resource.
Yep.
Right? And so why would the electric business be any different?
That's a very good mindset. Yeah, I like that look of it. And let's talk about what hyper localizing even means, because a lot of people, they hear the term and they think solar panels on the roofs, and that is part of it, right? But there's a lot of pieces to that. I've heard you make the analogy of it's like a stock portfolio. So let's talk about what that kind of looks like, because it's not just all your eggs in one basket.
No, in fact, to me, the highest risk you could have is only have eggs in one basket. Yeah. Right? There are utilities in this country that are relying on 1 or 2 power plants. And when those plants go out, whether it's for forced outage or because they have to refuel or for a variety of reasons, you're really stuck. So what I look at here, and the team has done a great job, we're working to become a distribution system operator, not just a distribution operator. So what does that mean? The fact of the matter is 13,000 of my 100,000 residential members have solar roofs. How can I take advantage of that especially during critical times, right? It means stitching together all the parts and pieces that are out there and on a localized level. That way, if I can aggregate and operate as a DSO first in my footprint, I can then, when the market comes, which I'm excited to say is going to happen April 1st of 2026, the SPP market will be supporting about 70% of Colorado.
Nice.
That market then allows us to buy and sell differently.
Okay.
You know, I always think about it like we consider computing today, right? If I sit in my office, I have my cell phone, I have a VoIP phone, I have my iPad, I have my computer, I've got screens, and they're all connected seamlessly. I don't sit there and say, well, I'm going to make a decision today and I'm going to only run my iPad, right? And I believe we've got to consider the grid in that fashion, which means you got to configure things a little bit differently. It's not just a big power plant to a big pipe to a smaller pipe to a meter to the home. And that I believe that model is completely gone. We just don't know it yet.
Okay. So in the midst of doing the hyper-localization and getting this stock portfolio of options, if you will, what does that mean to your company internally? Is that bringing on more people internally? Is it relying on outside resources more? Like how does that come into?
Again, it's a bit of both.
Okay.
So yes, we have bolstered our team here internally. About in May of 2024, we left our single power supplier that we had, and now I have 27 power contracts. Okay. So that's managed both with additional staff in-house. But very importantly, we work with a group called the Energy Authority, or TEA. They're our staff extension. Now, why did we do that? I used to run 4 desks at my last organization. I didn't want to do that again. But they've got national weather models. They have all the tools. They buy and sell for us under our direction.
Okay.
So it's a really valuable partnership. I would have had to add 24 people just to do what that allows us to do today.
Okay.
And so it makes a real difference in how we think. But I will say when you compare United Power to peer cooperatives, we have by far the leanest staff, meanest, not in a nasty way, but we get the job done very efficiently and effectively for our members.
Yeah. Full of grit and ready to do whatever the team needs.
And whatever it takes.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that decision to walk away from that one single power supplier, because that had been the way it went here for a long time, right? I'm sure you got a lot of pushback. I can't imagine walking through that and kind of having those conversations, because I think it was a lot, and I think that's hard to explain to people who can't see the big picture of things. Obviously, it's worked out well.
It's worked out very well, and I will say the idea of leaving the single power supplier started long before I got to United Power.
All right.
But here's one of the challenges we have. And look, I'm a firm believer in the co-op business model. I've worked in IOUs, I work with munis. I love them all, right? It's just like all my children. But the important thing to understand, in the early days of the cooperative model, it was really very tough for small co-ops to build power plants, to build transmission lines, because all the construction was large. Yeah. So we formed into these G&Ts, right? The generation and transmission organizations. Well, that worked great when everybody was kind of sort of the same size, right? They made sense then. Well, what happened over time, because of our rapid growth here at United Power, we became 20% of our G&T's business.
Okay.
The next biggest was 8, the next biggest was 5, and we were bigger than the bottom 26 put together.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. And so we got 1 vote.
Yeah.
Right. So how hard is it to rally a bunch of people to move expenses, shall we say, or costs to the one big guy? Right. So that was kind of, I'd say, at the core of the decision. The second thing is that we had a limitation. I call it a choke collar, that we could get no more than 5% of our power from someone else besides the G&T.
Okay.
Well, that doesn't work in a world where we have our members who want to put their own generation on. It doesn't work in a world where folks say, hey, we don't like that fuel mix. We want to see a more renewable portfolio. It doesn't work in a world where we had to turn down opportunities or get penalized for doing things that were good for our members and good to meet the state requirements. So there's a huge issue there. And I guess the third leg of this, and it was a multifaceted process, I can tell you.
Oh, yeah.
The third leg of this was really there were services being provided to us that we just didn't need, right? Because of our size. We had to do our own stuff in-house.
Yeah. Yeah.
The decision was made. I will thank our board profusely for it. It was a big risk.
Yeah.
We first told we couldn't find capacity. And then we were told we'd never really leave. Then we were told we would never win at FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then we were told we could never raise the money. We've done all of those things.
Yeah.
And, in retrospect, would I have preferred not to have left? Absolutely. We tried not to leave. We tried to come up with an agreement that was that would work for everybody. But it's like the old joke, why is divorce so expensive? It's because it's worth it.
That's it. And change isn't easy in any aspect of life, right? And the bigger the scale gets, the bigger the change gets, the more conversation comes around and the harder that decision is. But I think a lot of people can relate to that. Change is just not something that is easy for most people these days.
Well, it's like a button I used to wear. It said, I'm all for progress. It's change I can't stand.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So we're doing hyper localization here, and that looks totally different than the model where they're putting transmission lines in and pumping electricity from the East Coast to Colorado, right? Do PPAs still come into effect in your portfolio?
We are primarily a PPA organization.
Okay.
And we did that intentionally. As I said, in my last job, I had 57 power plants. I'm no stranger to operating power plants, but our expertise is really running a distribution utility, and I think one of the best in the country. Our SAIDI numbers are in the 60-minute range, right, which is 50% of the national average.
Yeah.
We have a system that I'm extremely proud of and how we operate, how quickly we can respond to our members. So yes, I get in theory, if somebody put a new nuclear plant in, 500 miles away and ran a line across the AC/DC ties on the eastern to western connection, we'll sign me up.
Okay.
But I just don't see that happening in a time that satisfies what we need to do to keep supporting our members.
So here, if I'm one of your members, what's coming to my mind right now is, okay, we have some PPAs in place and we're getting power a lot of different places. We're using hyperlocalization. All we hear about on the internet and the news these days is data centers. Data centers are going up all over this country, and they're driving the demand for energy through the roof. And a lot of utilities are either saying they're going to have to raise their rates because of a data center issue, or they're being told that the amount of energy on the grid is not available as much as it used to be. With your PPAs in place, how do those data centers in other parts of the country affect you guys?
Well, the data center opportunity, and I view it as an opportunity, is both an existential threat and an existential opportunity for this industry. So I look at it in a couple fashions. First, if you total the market capitalization of the top 100 utilities in America of any kind, it's $2.7 trillion.
Okay.
Big number, right?
Yeah.
The market cap of the Magnificent Seven, the Metas, the Microsoft, Googles, all that stuff, they're $34.5 trillion. So who's going to win that game if we don't figure out how to serve them?
Yeah.
We have a data center now. They're doubling in size. We have 3 others that we're working with. Okay. I actually think that data centers will drive costs down if this is approached properly. Okay. You have to do 3 things. You have to make sure that the data center is on the hook for any increases in cost for infrastructure. That's a watchword of what we already do at United Power. If you come to me and say, I'm going to build a 20-unit apartment building, you're going to pay for that infrastructure right up front.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Growth, we call it growth pays.
Yeah.
If so from the infrastructure standpoint, we get the money up front. Number 2, if you're coming in, we're going to make you commit for and pay for that power contract. Okay. Number 3, what does that mean? Well, it means when I go out for my next RFP for a power purchase agreement, I'm not going to look for 100 megawatts. I may look for 400 megawatts. And this is a case where the more you buy, the more you save, right?
Yeah.
So in fact, it should drive costs down for the system.
Okay.
The other piece, this is the topic at every conversation of every place I've gone for the last 3 years. I think some of the data center exuberance is exaggerated.
Yeah.
Because what we've already seen here is the same data center that comes to talk to my key account staff is talking to the key account staff of the utility down the road and the one in Kansas. And so it's the same project being counted multiple times.
Yeah. It's kind of that bandwagon of hyping it up.
Right? It is hyping it up. And so I'm a little bit caught. Now we put in a process. We have a large load process. We require people to pay us $50,000 up front to come to talk to us, non-refundable. A $650,000 fully refundable deposit to pay for system impact studies and all of those things. And then when the time comes and you're going to put your balance sheet on the line for the power, not our balance sheet for our members, because we want to keep them safe and secure.
And your members have to be proud of that, even if they don't know it, right? Because let's face it, most of the members out there aren't that deep into the conversation. But knowing that someone like you's looking out for them has got to make them feel a little bit better about it. Do you think we'll see, as these data centers start popping up, do you think we'll see more of the data centers having to generate their own power on a hyper-local scale for themselves?
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. We're having a lot of conversation. I'll go back to my commentary about becoming a distribution system operator. If a data center comes in and has a power supply that they can procure, I very much want to work with them so that we manage it for them. Remember, their expertise is in the data center. It's not in the electron center, right? So anybody who decides, yes, I'm going to put in a generator for either backup or batteries, who better to come to than the local cooperative that actually knows how to use the system? And so we've got to tweak our mindset. Just like when you show up at home and you have an Apple Watch, you have an iPhone, you have an iPad, you have a TV, all those things, there's a system behind that, right? We need to think about it that we're the router and less about we have to provide every piece of the value chain.
And I like that mindset. And I think a lot of more successful people have that same mindset as it's not all competition out there. We can work together. We can harmonize. We can coincide. And if we do, there's going to be more benefits for everybody out of it.
100%. I would argue we don't really have a choice but to do that, right? There's a limited number of gas gen sets out there. There's a finite number of batteries, right? And what does your local co-op do better than anything else? That's manage the local grid. Right. And,
for sure.
And so why wouldn't you want to go to that player?
That's a great way to look at it. No, that's very, and I hope that mindset catches on. The more talk there is. And I am a strong believer that we're in the times of misinformation right now. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet. And that's where everybody kind of frenzies and feeds off of, like we talked about, the bandwagon of let's just jump on this bandwagon of the hype of these data centers. There is a lot of that going on.
Well, I think it's important, again, you deal with the expertise. It's like when you don't feel good, do you go to Dr. Google or do you go to your primary care physician? One leads you down a different path than the other.
For sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I know that you have released a book earlier. It was like 2008-ish, right?
Right.
And that was a vision on sustainable energy.
Well, it was visions for sustainable energy future.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your mindset then. And did you see any of this coming now?
The answer is I saw most of this coming.
Okay.
And there were what I describe as two clear misses. One in particular. In 2008, 2009 timeframe, when I wrote the book, the natural gas revolution due to fracking had not really hit yet.
Makes sense.
Although I will be quick to point out, having worked for the DOE for 8 years, DOE funded a lot of that early work on hydraulic fracturing. So that was one area that was kind of missed, only because at that point it was, yes, we were going to add more renewables, and yes, we were going to continue to use cleaner coal and maybe new nuclear. And so that was a miss that I never couldn't see at that point.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you get smarter, at least I think was smarter with age or smarter with information. And the other piece is that it's in the book very much about aging infrastructure, but the power of computing and how we manage the system, I could not envision how far we have come. The fact is that from my cell phone, I can control my thermostat, or our engineers can control when the batteries cycle on and off through a SCADA system, through an outage management system. Remember in 08, 09, nobody had AMI, advanced metering infrastructure.
Yeah.
We had drive-by was like the latest, greatest things. But the fundamentals of the book, the challenge of what I call the carbon capacity conflict, we're still facing that today, right?
That's awesome.
In the Western United States, we have a lack of capacity, plenty of energy. There's no problem with energy, but the raw backbone capacity is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more expensive, while energy is getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So it's kind of interesting. Aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that even though I started in energy efficiency when I was first at the utility, we allowed the conversation about energy efficiency to not just delay the construction of power plants, but delay the investment in infrastructure. Because I'll suggest my investor-owned utility brethren and the regulators thought, oh, we can just defer that as well. Let's not build that transmission line. Let's not build that substation. Even though that's not what energy efficiency really does. Energy efficiency absolutely is wonderful at helping use less of the commodity, and therefore maybe not building as many power plants. But when it bridged into infrastructure, so today when I see this issue about, electricity rates are going up, it's as much because we have underinvested as an industry over the last 20 years under the false premise that we're going to efficiency our way out of the problem. And that just doesn't work.
Yeah. It's not viable.
No, my analogy is very simple. You can have a car that gets greater miles per gallon, but that doesn't mean you don't need to repave the road.
That's it. Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at it. Perfect. So I know you spend a lot of your time in the office, in meetings, and you're just wrapped up in the world of the utility industry. When you're not at work, what do you do?
Well, I love to hunt and fish.
Okay.
And so, that's a lot. I like to go hiking. It's one of the reasons I live here in Colorado, to be outside, just really spending time outside.
All right.
Camping, RVing. My wife finally forced me into buying an motorhome last year after, and the joke is, and my license plate's around, it said all I wanted was a tent, because that's true. But anything to do with the outdoors and
awesome.
is really important to me.
Okay. All right. And if you're going to be out there RVing and you guys are having dinner, what's a favorite thing to have when you're out there camping?
Well, again, I'm a big hunter, so there's nothing like a couple elk steaks or some antelope sausage and a nice bottle of wine.
Until you've had that elk steak, you can't. There's nothing like it.
That's absolutely it.
Yeah. And especially if you've got a story behind it, right?
Always.
So that's some of the best part about hunting is just the story. Just getting out of the way, not having your cell phone on, and just being able to kind of relax and wash off the rest of the world. Right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, listen, I appreciate your time today. I know you're a busy guy. I really enjoy your mindset towards the hyperlocalization of energy. I think it's a really good model. I really think that there's a lot to be learned from that. Hopefully people can go out and get your book. Is there anything that you want to give as far as a message to your members while we're here?
Well, again, I think we are working diligently to safely keep the lights on. I've said that for the 35 years I've been in the business. Sometimes there's a perception that utilities are sitting in dark rooms, executives smoking cigars and plotting to despoil the environment like Avatar, right?
Yeah.
And that's not it. And my experience, having been in the rooms in my later career as CEO, we're sitting, how do we safely keep the lights on in the most environmentally friendly way possible?
Yeah.
Understanding affordability and cost are critical. And that's what I wake up every day. I look at my cell phone when I get up at 5:45 to go work out, and I look at three things. Is everybody safe? Did we keep the lights on? And what was my load yesterday?
That's great. Yeah, perfect. Good deal. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for sitting down with us, and we'll talk soon.
Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode of Power Grid Talks, from the bucket trucks to the boardrooms. I'm your host, Tom Williamson. I want to thank you for joining me,
as we talk to the people behind the scenes who keep our grid strong. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to hit that subscribe button, give it a share, and leave a review so we can keep bringing more voices from across the utility world to the conversation table. You can also find us at PowerGridTalks.com. Until next time, stay safe and keep the power flowing.